Anunnaki Homeworld by Jason M. Breshears. Read by Kevin Stevens, also known as Grendel Dark. Archive 2. Orbital History of Planet Niburu. What a distance there is between a truth that is glimpsed and a truth that is demonstrated. Quoted from French admirer of Isaac Newton in The Discoverers by Daniel Boorstin. In order to demonstrate any object's orbital history, one must first retain an accurate chronology of the world's history. This author has provided this in his Chronicon, Timelines of the Ancient Future, an expansive chronological work detailing our planet's history and future from 5239 BC to 2106 AD, that aligns and correlates over 40 different ancient and modern calendars and dating systems. The exact year dates in the timelines of Chronicon are further supported by the precise and meticulously charted year dates encoded within the Great Pyramid's geometrical calendar, as seen in this author's work, Chronotecture, Lost Science of Prophetic Engineering. Additionally, verifying the exactitude of this timeline is the orbital chronology of planet Phoenix, as shown in When the Sun Darkens, Orbital History and 2040 AD Return of Planet Phoenix. Within these works are provided the hundreds of sources that validate these timelines. In this author's prior work, When the Sun Darkens, the Annus Mundi chronology is explained in detail, an unbroken timeline from year 1 to the 6,000th year of man's banishment from Eden. Year 1 is thoroughly demonstrated to be 3895 BC, and the Great Flood that virtually destroyed the Earth occurred 1,656 years later in 2239 BC, 1656 AM. The 6,000th year, when the Anunnaki are to be vanquished by the chief cornerstone, stone the builders Anunnaki rejected, is 2106 AD, known as Armageddon. It is a universal belief that the Watchers, Nephilim, fallen sons of God, Anunnaki, caused the flood during a time when civilization was centered in Egypt, a culture of pre-Diluvian people having no connection to the dynastic Egyptian civilization celebrated today, which emerged after the cataclysm. It happened that 792 years after this deluge, the tribes of Israel in Egypt were led out of the country by Moses after a series of cataclysms in 1447 BC, 2448 AM, known as the Exodus. That a 792-year period counted down forward to this monumental and biblical event is recorded in the chronometry of the Great Pyramid, a geometrical calendar that demonstrates over and over that dates recorded within its own timeline are reflected both forward and backward to similar occurrences, not only in history, but also in architectural features. And this proves interesting to our present study. With the flood as 1656 Hebrew reckoning and 1656 Annus Mundi, or 792 plus 864 years, 1656, we are provided the key to Sumerian sexagesimal calendrical mathematics, as well as an insight to the connection between Earth and Niburu. The number 864 is considered by many numerologists to be the foundation of time number, which links all the world's calendrical systems that are predicated on units of 6, 12, and 144. The sum of 864 is itself 144 times 6, or 108 times 8, both 144 and 108 being predominant in the chronometry of the Great Pyramid and Stonehenge, as will be reviewed. The diameter of the Sun in miles is 864,000, and this Earth that travels around it has an equatorial diameter of 7,920 miles, 792 times 10. However, the circumference of the Earth in royal cubits used to measure out the Great Pyramid is exactly 86,400,000 cubits. The sum of 864 is the common denominator between time and space. 864. Months in 72 years. 72 is half of 144. 8,640 days in 24 years, 360-day years. 8,640 hours in 360 days, ancient year. 86,400 minutes in 60 days. 86,400 seconds in 1 day. 1 day is 1,440 minutes. In Hebrew, the words world and all nations, as well as habitation, all have a geometrical value of 432. Combining these terms provides us with the phrase whole inhabited world for a value of 864. In Stonehenge, the Anunnaki are represented in the presence of the blue stone ring and horseshoe. The ring has a diameter of 79.2 feet. Conceptually, we can interpret this data to show that the whole inhabited world, space beginning with a time of 864, would be destroyed, flood, by addition of Anunnaki, duration of 792 years, ending in the 1656 year, 864 plus 792, or 2239 BC. Our planet and that of the Anunnaki are related in space and time more than any other planets in this solar system. In fact, it will be shown in this book that Niburu as well as Earth do not belong in this system, both having their origin with the ancient star, now dying, once called the Day Star, but now has gone dark. In this author's work, entitled Descent of the Seven Kings, 2052 AD Return of the Fallen Ones, we are shown the Anunnaki chronology timeline, a calendar beginning with Anunnaki history in 5239 BC that divides our own world's history into 600-year-long epochs. In the 600th year of the Anunnaki chronology, or 4639 BC, the Anunnaki rebelled against their maker over the issue of mankind. In 4309 BC, the Day Star imploded, becoming a dark star, and billions of rock, ice, and planetary detritus passed through the present solar system and damaged all the planets and moons, even destroying the original Phoenix, leaving behind a ringed asteroid belt. The dead and fragmenting shell of Phoenix now orbits on the dark star's ecliptic, orbiting our sun every 138 years. Our own planet traveled 270 years from its orbital position around the Day Star to its present position, tightly fit between the orbits of Mars and Venus, where we do not belong. In the equidistant exponential distribution of the planets from the surface of the Sun, the presence of our planet between Mars and Venus disrupts the entire harmonic pattern. But this is the subject of Descent of the Seven Kings. In 4039 BC, mankind was placed in the Garden of God, walled enclosure in Hebrew, and the builders, Anunnaki, set to the task of renovating Earth. In the sixth day, according to Genesis 1, was man created, or 144 hours, 24 times 6. And in the 144th year after he was made, mankind rebelled against the word of God, and was cursed in 3895 BC, year 1, Annus Mundi. In Descent of the Seven Kings, it is conclusively shown that in the Anunnaki's 1800th year, 600 times 3, they descended on earth among mankind, with this year being 3439 BC, 4:56 a.m. The 3439 BC descent of the Watchers is the primary focus of the Book of Enoch, a text that not only details their arrival, their mission, sexual integration, and creation of genetic hybrids, but also their fate to be imprisoned and then released during the last days to execute these same designs again. The Book of Enoch even opens up its first passage with a notice to the reader that the text was specifically recorded for the time of the end. As the descent of the Anunnaki in 3439 BC was 1200 years, 600 plus 600, before the flood in 2239 BC, this period in days was exactly 432,000, half of 864,000, before the cataclysm of 713 BC, when the Sun retrograded 10 degrees during a near collision with the dark satellite, as we will review, Earth orbited the Sun in 360 days. After 713 BC, the orbit was lengthened by 5.25 days a year, resulting in an annual period of 365.25 days. This 1200-year period from their descent to the deluge is featured in many major ancient legends and myths of ages prior to a dreadful cataclysm, with these stories related in Descent of the Seven Kings. For our purposes here, we revert back to our erudite scholar Zecharia Sitchin, who wrote that the Sumerian tablet texts he translated specifically record that the Anunnaki and the planet Niburu arrived and passed Earth exactly 432,000 years before the flood. As unveiled in Descent, scholars have misinterpreted the years and shars of Sumerian reckoning as annual periods of the Earth around the Sun. But the truth of the matter is that the Sumerians referred to planetary movement as shars, as Genesis 1 reveals. The evening and the morning was the first day. The 432,000 shars is thus 432,000 days, or precisely 1,200 years. Inadvertently, Sitchin too provides us with the date of 1,200 years before the flood, 3439 BC. This is not unprecedented, for the Mayan long count and many others like the Kali Yuga all factor days, and any association to years is through misinterpretation. The year was insignificant to the pre-flood people because prior to the catastrophe, there were no seasons. Even the early prophetic texts like Enoch wrote of the last days, not years. This year is confirmed in another way. According to the Book of Jubilees 4:15, the father of Enoch was born 4 years after the appearance of the Watchers on Earth. He was named Jared in commemoration of their arrival. His name derived from the root Erid, meaning descent. Jared was born in 460 Annus Mundi, or 3435 BC, 4 years after 3439 BC. This amazing year appears to be the primary astronomical focus of the Great Pyramid's descending passage. This tunnel leads into the subterranean chamber area below the edifice to a pit, and, as detailed in Chronotexture and When the Sun Darkens, these architectural features refer to the abyss, the bottomless pit below the solar system from where Niburu emerges every 792 years. The antediluvian pole star was Alpha Draconis, the eye of the dragon, with the Earth enjoying a 90-degree axis like Mercury and Venus and revolving around the Sun in a perfect 360-day year, aligned in synchronicity with the zodiacal year. In the 1870s, Astronomer Royal of Scotland, Charles Piazzi Smith, concluded in his study of the Great Pyramid that the descending passage, for reasons unknown to himself, had pointed directly at Alpha Draconis in the year 3440 BC, this being only 1 year off the true date of 3439 BC. Alpha Draconis was the circumpolar constellation, the lord of the houses of the zodiac. In the precessional cycle, the entire zodiacal belt retrogrades 1 degree every 72 years, and 11 degrees is 792 years, the Anunnaki in the Babylonian Enuma Elish tablets being represented by the number 11. Also, 12 degrees of the zodiac requires 864 years. The beginning and end of the Passovers of Niburu are interlinked and involve the Anunnaki. The history of the world, rise and fall of civilizations, comet impacts, meteoric fallout, plague mists, earthquakes, and mass migrations are the direct result of the continual presence of Niburu in our system, and the debris the Anunnaki Homeworld leaves in its wake. Orbital history of planet Niburu. 3439 BC, 4:56 a.m. As Niburu descends over ecliptic, 200 watchers arrive on Earth by a mutual compact to create a race of genetic hybrids to help them establish their control over mankind. They conspire to provide humanity with advanced knowledge in exchange for their daughters. Females are provided to the Anunnaki, and in return, mankind is given specific knowledge of herbalism, sorcery, incantations, power over evil spirits, ghosts of pre-Adamic people, metallurgy, weaponsmithing, how to make war machines, jewelry, feminine cosmetics, and brew draughts that would render women barren, contraceptives, so as to retain their beautiful figures. They were also taught advanced astronomical sciences and astrology and divination. The Anunnaki instructed men in the building craft. In this year, the world suffered terrible earthquakes and flooding. The Jewish Haggadah writings tell of this flood, which was more ancient than Noah's, in 2239 BC, which occurred in the reign of Enosh. The Yazidis of Asia also recall this belief in two archaic floods, specifying that Noah's was the later one. As this is the exact timing of Niburu according to the Sumerian texts, and Enosh was indeed king according to the book of Jasher in this year, the following excerpt proves useful to our thesis. The sons of men forsook the Lord all the days of Enosh and his children, and the anger of the Lord was kindled on account of their works and abominations which they did in the earth. And the Lord caused the waters of the Gihon River to overwhelm them, and he destroyed and consumed them. And he destroyed the third part of the earth. And notwithstanding this, the sons of men did not turn from their evil ways. The Gihon is the Nile River in Egypt, and the reader must remember here that the passing of Niburu not only brought the Anunnaki to Earth, but also simultaneously resulted in the death of a third of mankind. This is the underlying theme of the return of Niburu in the last days. The Anunnaki Homeworld entered the system in 3499 BC, 396 AM, unseen from Earth, and required 60 years to pass over the system until it descended in 3439 BC, to bring the Anunnaki as it passed close to Earth, finishing its 792-year orbit between both stars. Thus, Nibiru's orbital period is below our system's 732 years, 366 to aphelion and back, and 60 years over the ecliptic for a total of 792 years. This pattern remains fixed throughout history. Sitchin remarks in Wars of Gods and Men that the Sumerian texts over and again claim that the starting point for their histories was exactly 432,000 years before the Great Deluge. As these are actually days, this pinpoints the year as 3439 BC, or 1200 years before the flood in 2239 BC. This is the year, according to the Jasher account, that a flood destroyed a third of the world, and again, Sitchin studies confirm this. Sitchin cites a text excavated from the ruins of Sumer concerning the descent of a god named Enki, that reads, "When I approach Earth, there was much flooding." In Hamlet's Mill, Gregorio de Santillana and Hertha de Deschamps note that the number 432,000 seems to be where science and myth merge, so that this number is significant in mythological systems around the world, as noted duly by Sitchin in citing their work. 3073 BC, 822 AM, Niburu reached aphelion, furthest point from the sun, after 366 years, starting 366 years back toward inner system. 200th year of Enoch's life. 2707 BC, 1188 AM. Niburu ascends out of the deep after 732 years, 366 plus 366, entering inner system unseen from Earth. This is 108 Anno Pyramid, which started with Great Pyramid's completion in 2815 BC, 1080 AM. Niburu begins 60 years over solar ecliptic. 2647 BC, 1248 AM. Niburu descends over ecliptic, completing 792-year orbit, 732 plus 60, unseen from Earth. 2281 BC, 1614 AM. Niburu reaches aphelion after 366 years, starting 366 years back toward inner system. 1915 BC, 1980 AM. Niburu descends out of the deep after 732 years, 366 plus 366, entering the inner system. Sargon I of Akkad reigned, later to be known as Amar-Uda-Ak, Marduk, of Sumer and Babylon, called Amraphel and Nimrod by the ancient Hebrews. The Anunnaki planet appears close to Earth as a great black shadow, darkening the stars and emerging from the underworld below solar system. The Babylonians see the black planet as a celestial dragon spitting fire and lightning upon Earth called Tiamat, a huge aberration in the night sky that trembles the Earth that the Egyptians referred to as Typhon. Because it passes and everything returns to normal after the atmospheric and geologic disturbances, Sargon I was considered a vanquisher of the Anunnaki, and Marduk in Babylon was famed for returning a constellation back into the sky. Niburu merely moved away and the constellation reappeared. These traditions are even immortalized in the Enuma Elish epic. Hesiod's Theogony further preserves this memory, saying that it occurred shortly after Zeus, Nimrod, conquered the Titans, Japhethites. See Chronicon at 1948 and 1920 BC. Hesiod wrote that Typhon appeared with strange dragon heads, olden designation for comets, with black tails. The dragon heads gave off flames and vibrated the earth with noises as mountains trembled. Thunderbolts struck the earth, and water boiled until a fiery hurricane was born. Earthquakes shook the world, and the sea overextended its bounds. The disaster, this word means evil star, concluded with a powerful lightning bolt flashing between Earth and Typhon, which gave rise to the innumerable legends of a hero god who slew a sky monster with his Labris thunderbolt, or battle axe. This lightning bolt is none other than a flux tube of electricity between the two planets, a phenomenon first witnessed by astronomers in ancient times in 1994 AD, when Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 fragmented into about 21 pieces and slammed into Jupiter. The close proximity of a metal and rock moon of Niburu to Earth causes this object to break free of Nibiru's gravitational hold. This begins the orbit of the dark satellite, which will pass through the inner system for 16 years until nearly colliding with Earth again in 1899 BC, before moving to a much more stable orbit. The dark satellite will be covered later in this work. This appearance of Niburu is consistent with the period when Hammurabi, Amraphel Nimrod, initiated the code of laws famously named after him, which venerate the Anunnaki in their opening lines. This year is 900 Anno Pyramid and 324 after flood, 108 times 3. 1855 BC, 2040 AM. Niburu descends over ecliptic, completing 792-year orbit, 732 plus 60. Unseen from Earth. A massive strewn field of rock and comet debris trailing the dead planet breaks free and begins its own orbit around the Sun as the Sodom Trojan Apocalypse Group. This begins a 2,520, 360 times 7 day countdown to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and the Harappan civilization of the Indus Valley. 1489 BC. 2406 AM. Niburu reaches aphelion after 366 years, starting 366 years back toward inner system. 1123 BC, 2772 AM. Niburu ascends out of the deep after 732 years, 366 plus 366, in direct transit between Earth and the Sun, causing the Sun to darken. Due to ecological disasters and a dynastic change in China, Wu Cheng establishes the Zhou dynasty and 250,000 Chinese take ships and sail to America. This account is little known to readers in the West, and interestingly, this year is 324 years, 108 times 3, after Exodus, 1447 BC, Israelites depart Egypt. 1063 BC, 2832 AM. Niburu descends over ecliptic, completing 792-year orbit, 732 plus 60, unseen from Earth. 697 BC, 3198 AM. Niburu reaches aphelion after 366 years, starting 366 years back toward inner system. 331 BC, 3564 AM. Niburu ascends out of the deep after 732 years, 366 plus 366, entering inner system, unseen from Earth, in same year that Alexander the Great's Grecian force defeated the Persian army of Darius in northern Mesopotamia in the Battle of Gaugamela. Alexander also took Egypt, and this start of a Greek empire was the 600th year of the divided kingdom chronology, counting the years from the division between Israel and Judah in 931 BC, and the 414th year, cursed earth period, of the post-exilic chronology, from 745 BC, when the 10 tribes of Israel were deported from Palestine and taken into Assyrian domains to later migrate into Persia, Asia Minor, and Europe. 271 BC, 3624 AM. Niburu descends over ecliptic, completing 792-year orbit, 732 plus 60, unseen from Earth. An immense strewn trail of debris trailing the Anunnaki homeworld is captured in the sun's own gravitational field, breaking free of Niburu, and begins its own orbit as the Romanid Apocalypse Comet Group. 96 AD, 3990 AM. Niburu reaches aphelion after 366 years, starting 366-year journey back toward the inner system. While the imprisoned Anunnaki are at this furthest distance from the Earth, the Creator gives mankind the gift of the future knowledge concerning the return of the Anunnaki and their 7 kings in the last days, in the form of the vision known as the Revelation, recorded by the last apostle John, a prisoner on the Isle of Patmos. This man was essentially suffering on his small island what the Anunnaki suffered on their prison planet, confinement. 462 AD, 4356 AM. Niburu ascends out of the deep after 732 years, 366 plus 366, entering inner system unseen from Earth in the 2700th year, 900 times 3, after the Great Flood. 522 AD, 4416 AM. This is the only year in history that Niburu and planet Phoenix traverse the inner system at the same time, both descending over the ecliptic. Niburu crosses ecliptic after 60 years orbiting over the Sun, and Phoenix ends its 138-year orbit to begin another one. See when the Sun darkens. The immense train of Niburu yields forth a Stronfield mass that begins orbiting the Sun and breaks into 2 distinct groups, the 2046 AD Nibiru Comet Orbit Group and the Rubin Comet Group 2047 AD. This year is 5760 Anunnaki chronology, or 144 times 40, or 360 times 16. 888 AD, 4782 AM. Niburu reaches aphelion after 366 years, starting 366-year journey back toward the inner system. Much of its train begins falling behind the planet. 1254 AD, 5148 AM. Niburu ascends out of the deep after 732 years, 366 plus 366, entering inner system unseen from Earth. Free from its gravitational hold and lagging behind by 6 years is an expansive detritus field that had, at some prior time, broken off of the dead planet's surface and will enter the inner system and disperse into several different comet groups in 1260 AD. 1314 AD, 5208 AM. Niburu descends over ecliptic, entering the inner solar system in direct transit between Earth and the Sun in the 16th year of the historic period known to the scholars as the Seven Comets of Europe. Niburu appears in the final year of a period when meteorites, comets, plagues, and earthquakes from 1298 through 1314 AD decimated the populations of Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Probably Africa, Americas too, but no records passed down. In The Black Plague by George Doe, we find that the first reports of the plague came out of the East. They were confused, exaggerated, frightening, as reports from that quarter of the world so often are. Descriptions of storms and earthquakes, of meteors and comets trailing noxious gases that killed trees and destroyed the fertility of the land. William Bramley in Gods of Eden wrote that when the comets passed, there were reports of plague mists from China to Europe, and many historians estimate that a third of Europe was killed by the Black Plague. This, by extension, infers that the death toll was probably a third of the entire world, for many nations left records of these catastrophic events, but actual death tolls were not taken in China, India, and elsewhere outside of Europe. One of the sicknesses that developed was influenza, which derives from the word influence, because it was believed to have its origin with the stars, influence of the stars, or comets. Niburu transited, and all of China and Asia, and that hemisphere during the daytime, was cast into utter darkness as the world trembled and quaked. But on the other side of the world at night, European historians recorded that an awe-inspiring blackness appeared and passed over the heavens. This was the last appearance of Niburu in the inner system before it returns in 2046 AD. This historical period mirroring both the 3439 BC appearance of Niburu that destroyed a third of humanity and initiated flooding and disasters before the deluge of Noah, and again in 1915 BC, when Niburu appeared as a great black darkness in the heavens, with comets and fiery storms which the ancients called Tiamat and Typhon. As Niburu has trailing it hundreds of millions of fragments of rock and ice, so too do we see that it also has a vanguard preceding it of comets and detritus in a strewn train. The plague fogs, disruptive weather patterns, and blighting of crops is all remembered by the Greeks in an amazing tradition concerning the Telchines, a race who lived before the flood, and were guilty of carving the first images of the gods. Zeus decided to destroy them because they had been interfering with the weather, raining magical mists and blighting crops. The Telchines were enchanters worshipped by a pre-flood matriarchal society, these being the Anunnaki and their genitrix, see Descent of the Seven Kings. Interestingly, the Greek myths of Typhon claim he rose up from under heaven to challenge the gods, other planets on ecliptic, and indeed, in 1915 BC, the Anunnaki Homeworld ascended into the inner system. This year is precisely 792 years to the year 6000 Annus Mundi, 2106 AD. Armageddon War, when the chief cornerstone will vanquish the Anunnaki. This year of 1314 AD was 6552, 6000 plus 552, Phoenix cycle of the Anunnaki chronology, and 3552, 3000 plus 552 years after the flood. In the following year, 1315 AD, bad harvests are reported throughout Europe. An estimated 10% of the population died as cannibalism and starvation was rampant. 1680 AD, 5574 AM. Niburu reaches aphelion after 366 years, starting 366-year journey back toward inner solar system. 2046 AD, 5940 AM. Niburu ascends out of the deep after 732 years, 366 plus 366, entering the inner solar system and nearly colliding into Earth. The effect Niburu will have on our world in this year of 2046 AD is so catastrophic and so detailed in the archives of ancient prophetic literature that all of this will await for a full description later in this book. 2106 AD, 6000 AM. Nibiru descends back over ecliptic close to Earth in the 6000th year of the Annus Mundi, original Hebraic timeline from man's banishment in 3895 BC. In order to fully appreciate the effect Nibiru will have upon our world in 2046 AD, we must first review how this Anunnaki homeworld has affected our planet in the past through its distinct and devastating comet groups. As we will now find, the Anunnaki planet has been fragmenting and continually seeding our solar system with the mechanics of apocalypse.